Welcome to GrassRoot, Ohio, conversations with everyday people working on important issues here in Columbus and all around Ohio. I'm Carolyn Harding, and today I'm talking with Rita Hallaveld and Carissa Roberts, organizers for the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, Central Ohio Childcare for All Initiative. Rita Hallaveld, she, her, is passionate about community building and organizing with an eye toward addressing the root causes of issues. With a background in social work, she previously worked as a mental health therapist for a decade, first in a community-based work and then in private practice. A single parent of a preschooler, Rita currently dedicates her spare time to organizing with Columbus DSA's Childcare campaign and volunteers on the board of a summer camp. She is an outdoor enthusiast with hiking and rock climbing among her favorite activities. Carissa Roberts, they grew up in Upper Arlington and attended The Ohio State University studying Spanish Linguistics. As a childhood trauma and relationship abuse survivor with chronic mental health issues, she is passionate about pursuing collective solutions to systemic issues that impact our individual lives. Carissa joined the Columbus DSA Child Care campaign to advance feminist, racial, and economic justice through prioritizing the needs of children, parents, and early childhood educators at a local level here in Central Ohio. Outside of the Child Care campaign, she is also a dedicated volunteer with the Central Ohio Housing Action Network, helping to connect tenants facing eviction in Franklin County with legal resources. Last week at the Ohio Education Association March, I met Rita and asked her why she was marching. She shared her Child Care for All campaign with me, and I think we all will benefit to learn more about this need and their campaign's proposed solutions. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. We're glad to be here.
So, I am curious what brought each one of you into activism. What got you started? Let's start with you, Rita.
Sure. I have long had an interest in the kind of systemic macro level policy issues, especially as they relate to mental health. And when the pandemic hit and everything shut down in March of 2020, I found myself without childcare, had a 2-year-old at the time, which is a lot to deal with. And so as I was seeing all of the impacts of not having childcare, the additional uprisings regarding racial justice and police violence, I thought I wanted to be able to do something. And so I joined the local chapter of the DSA that seemed like the best fit for my political and social ideals and my humanist ethics, and figured that would be a good place to get started in activism. And so it's been a little bit here and there. And maybe about a year ago, I was reading a book called Crawling Behind, forgetting the name of the author at the moment, but it is all about the state of childcare, early childhood in the United States. And that really prompted me to try to pull people together to do something about making affordable childcare a reality here.
All right. How about you, Carissa?
Sure. So I think I recognized a lot of my story and what Rita was saying. So I echo a lot of it, but certainly I was a lot slower, I think, to wanting to get involved. I've always cared about doing service and helping people and volunteering, but I've never, or for a long time, I didn't really have an eye towards systemic issues. And so I've had mental health issues for a long time, and I experienced a mental health crisis a few years ago. And I kind of rebuilt my life, trying to figure out what I actually want to orient towards, what is important to me, what do I value. And increasingly, I recognize that being a voice and contributing to larger efforts that seek collective solutions to these problems that, you know, I ended up in a therapy room, but some people end up in a jail cell, wherever. Some people just hide it and don't cope with having these difficulties. And so for me, I really felt it was important to get involved in activism because I now have this kind of language to describe that what I experienced and what my family experienced and the kind of pressures that were on my family in order to afford having children and growing up, and particularly in Upper Arlington, which is, it was hard for them to make ends meet as single parents, divorced, that increasingly I recognize that many people are facing these pressures and in ways that oftentimes is difficult even to articulate. So I got involved with Columbus DSA because that, I think, closely matched my own political leanings. And I wanted to get involved in childcare because I think there's so much that we can do to help children that give them hopeful outcomes in a way that the class pressures of society make it very difficult for certain kinds of people, such as single parents, such as people of color, to be able to afford having children and to be able to care for their children in ways that other families can.
All right. Well, and you're so young, both of you, and you're wise at a young age. So what was the exact, do you remember the exact aha moment where you said, okay, I'm going to start organizing? Do you remember that moment, or at least, or did it just kind of grow up, grow on you? What about you, Carissa? Carissa, I can't hear you. No. Did something change with your computer? Let's go with Rita, and we'll, sure. And then we'll get back to you. Could it be your iPhone, your earphones? Go ahead, Rita.
That's fine. Yeah. I don't think there was one particular aha moment. It kind of, the pressure sort of built. When George Floyd was murdered and all of the protests arose around the country, that was definitely a moment that I was able to arrange. My child wasn't with me, she was with friends, and I was able to get involved in some of those protests. And through the course of that and meeting some other people who've been organizing for a long time, I thought, you know, I've got some time right now. I want to do something. And then reading that book, Crawling Behind, just sort of highlighted for me that there's a major policy issue that has such big ramifications. And it's hard to find the time, but I had there was another DSA member that I was spending a lot of time with who said that some of the most effective organizers that he's ever known have been single parents. And that phrase just kind of stuck with me and kept coming back as I was reading and thinking about things and wanting to make a difference. And so I thought, well, I might as well try, see what can happen. And I'll learn a lot along the way and hopefully be able to build a bigger movement.
Excellent. Carissa, you're now on mute. Let's take yourself. Can we hear you?
No.
Oh, no. What happened in that short term? We lost you somehow.
I have no idea. I didn't touch anything.
Here you are. You're back.
Now.
Okay.
You're back.
I removed my other recording device. I don't know. I didn't touch anything. So
no worries. Just tell me. Do you remember your aha moment?
Yeah. So for me, I was really scared to get involved in organizing. A lot of my own fears and shames, and it was quite countercultural to the family that I came from. And actually, and it's quite dark, but my cousin died by suicide towards the end of 2020. And for me, I think that gave me some kind of permission to live my life on my terms.
Yes.
And say, you know what, this is really scary for me, but I'm going to try, and I'm going to have that courage, and I'm going to live how I want to, and not how I think people want me to.
I respect that so much. All right, let's, according to your literature that Rita sent to me, it's quote here, we believe that every worker deserves a living wage. Let's see, every child deserves to be nurtured, and all families deserve to be supported and thrive. What is the reality in Central Ohio right now? Let's start with you, Rita.
Yeah, so there has long been a difficulty to afford childcare. And we do hear some politicians talking about that. And there are some initiatives, there's publicly funded childcare, but that only provides support for families that live at or below 142% of the federal poverty level. And there are not enough center-based slots to cover all of the children that are just in Franklin County alone. I haven't paid very much attention to the entire state, but just in Franklin County, because it costs more to provide care for children under the age of 3 or 4, because of the ratios that you need for staff to children, there are a few, right? I think it's something like 2 or 2.1 children 2 and below for every center-based slot available. So the reality is that there are a lot of families who either are just providing care on their own. They've got family, friends who are providing care. There are many, many women who can't be in the workforce right now. That's been exacerbated by the pandemic. We've heard a lot about the Great Resignation. And on the labor side of things, the average hourly wage for Ohio early educators in childcare settings is only $10.67 an hour. A single parent making, like a single mother of 2 making only $15 an hour spends over half of her wages on childcare without enough left for rent, utilities, et cetera. So there are a lot of hard choices and sacrifices that families are making, whether they have children or work in childcare. 95% of the workforce, early childhood workforce in Ohio, and 28% of that are Black or African American. So it is disproportionately a gender and racial equity issue. Yeah, and so some of that data was compiled by Groundwork Ohio, to report on the state of the workforce in 2020. And I can kind of go into some other data as we move along, but that's
okay.
Sort of in a nutshell. Yeah.
Well, it says your program has 4 major objectives. But before we go, so let's say those 4. This is Carolyn Harding with GrassRoot Ohio, and today I'm talking with Rita Hallaveld and Carissa Roberts, both with Childcare for All, the campaign, the DSA campaign that they're kicking off very shortly. And the program has 4 major objectives. Number 1, puts kids first. Number 2, values care workers. 3, is accountable and equity driven. 4, applies lessons from previous efforts in other cities. So, Carissa, let's talk about putting kids first.
Yeah. So expanding on what Rita was saying, we say there's a lot of pressure for parents to be able to afford childcare, and that, you know, the longer that they're out of the home, the less that child has to spend within the family unit. And also childcare workers who aren't paid very well to perform this childcare work then are having to work longer hours in order to live their own lives, and they don't have necessarily the bandwidth that they want to be able to provide to children. And so we want to be able to provide a living wage for care workers, and be able to provide childcare for all, for parents and for caretakers, as a way to help build security into the family unit as they're navigating raising their children and as the child is developing. Because we know from what child's bodies go through is that these early years are especially critical in guiding the direction of their development and guiding, say, the orientation of their nervous system to the world around them. We know there's epigenetic influences where certain genes turn on and off based on environmental exposure. And so we want to put kids first because we recognize that the adults are facing a lot of pressure and aren't able to show up for kids in the way that even the adults want to. And so we want to be able to prioritize giving kids the opportunity to develop and to feel nurtured and be nurtured, and in family units where the parents aren't experiencing these chronic stress factors of how do I make ends meet? How am I going to continue to afford this? What does, I mean, and even for people like me who don't have children, but are looking to want children in the future, is how do I even begin to plan to afford that at some point in my life? And a lot of people make decisions just to simply not have children or not have as many children as they want because of these childcare expenses. And I think, we want to put children first because I don't think money is more important in this situation. And if there's a will, there's a way. And I certainly think there's a way to do it.
It's first.
Trying to build that will.
All right. Number 2, values care workers. And you kind of covered that a little bit, but Rita?
Yeah. So the issue of care workers not being paid a living wage is part of what contributes to there being a 25% turnover rate in the field in Ohio. That's incredibly high. And that also relates to stability for children. When they're constantly losing their caregivers, they don't have that stability of the person who's caring for them on a regular basis, which leads to various traumas and difficulties. And that can have an impact down the road in terms of involvement in the criminal justice system. So in terms of care workers, really like to see a living wage, which would be probably at least $15 or $16 an hour. Right now, early childhood providers make only about a third of what kindergarten teachers and like public education teachers make in the state. We'd love to bring that up to parity if we possibly could. And so, it remains to be seen whether we're able to do that, but that's our goal.
All right, number 3 is accountable and equity driven. Carissa.
Yeah, so we recognize and we're committed to childcare as an issue because this is a frontier that impacts gender lines, that impacts racial lines, and that we want to use our power in order to redistribute wealth in a kind of way that says, like, we're going to uplift everyone, and the people who are most affected by this issue are disproportionately people of color and women and families, and that as a campaign, we're committed sorry, Rita, can you go?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's so many things that are involved in this, right? But one thing that we're really committed to is building a really diverse coalition that takes into account the needs of various race groups and different socioeconomic status in the area. So that's why we're trying to do kind of our launch, which I think we'll probably talk about soon, a coalition conversation on EAMP, because we want to make sure that we have the voices of current childcare providers as well as parents and those who are impacted the most strongly. Childcare every year costs on average $12 in Franklin County.
Can you say that again? You kind of had a glitch.
Yeah, childcare costs on average around $12,000 a year for a family, like per child in Ohio. Some areas of Ohio might be a little bit lower, but Franklin County, it's about $12,000 a year. That's as much as college tuition. And so many families can't afford that.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Carissa.
Oh, yeah, I'll add one more point, which is that we're looking down the line to try to introduce a ballot initiative, and that through funding, we're trying to, should I even go into that, Rita, actually?
Sure.
Yeah,
we're going to go into it eventually, and I'm going to ask you how you're going to do it. So let's talk about it.
Okay, yeah. All right. So we're looking at developing a ballot initiative and trying to raise money. We're looking at different revenue options right now, but one example would be through perhaps a property tax. And so with that example, we're looking to redistribute some kind of income to childcare. So looking at people, say, with higher property taxes would then contribute more to a system like this, where these funds are used to fund the childcare programs and fund the labor costs, and that, if you're in a lower income bracket, or if you don't make a certain amount, that then you're not needing to contribute as much to that. And so in that way, we're hoping to help redistribute some of that money as a society and say, we want to prioritize childcare in this way, even if it doesn't necessarily directly impact my own locale.
So that directly impacts the equity-driven aspect of your goals. And the last one that we were talking about is applies lessons from previous efforts in other cities. So Rita, can you tell us some of the other cities that have done this well?
Yes.
Or are doing it well?
Yeah, the one that we've taken a lot of inspiration from and we're the most excited about. Sorry, my child just came into the room, is Portland. So Multnomah County now has the Ballot Initiative in November of 2020. And that's sort of our model that we're looking at, where top 8% of earners are paying a higher income tax now. And that funds universal preschool in the entire county. So the Portland chapter of the DSA was really instrumental in getting this campaign going. And so they formed a really big coalition. There is a separate body that was formed as part of what was written into the legislation that passed, that is at the county level, and they administer the program and have like a community oversight board that helps to ensure that everything is being followed and that it's equitable. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna go on mute for a moment and maybe let Carissa.
Great. Carissa, are there any other cities besides Portland that are doing something?
Yeah, so we know in Dayton, they actually passed a ballot initiative and it for pre-K for all. And it didn't have a labor component or the living wage labor component. And it was, I believe, for ages 3 to 4. But we know that in Dayton, it did pass and that voters there did want to see like this. And I think Cincinnati had a similar measure as well that passed, and maybe Rita would be able to speak on that. I'm not as familiar with the Cincinnati initiative, but certainly in Dayton, that gives us a lot of hope. You know, certainly we're ambitious in our project, but I think, you know, kids deserve it.
Oh, so, yeah. And I was just going to ask you, my next question was, how will you go about getting this? So you were going to do a ballot initiative for the city of Columbus or for the county of Franklin County?
So that is still to be determined. Right now, we're kind of finishing up sort of our research on what's going to be the most likely and most effective to get the most funds. And we're leaning towards the city of Columbus because of that. Ohio has some rules about how taxes can be raised. And this is most likely going to be funded by some kind of tax, either a property tax or an income tax. The income tax has to be done at the city level only, and and that has to be approved by voters. So hence the ballot measure. Property taxes would be at the county level, and that has to be put on the ballot, like introduced by a county commissioner. So it is not as much of a grassroots effort. And we're really hoping to just build the people power and keep this a grassroots effort. By really like talking to voters and getting that going. But I think ultimately it will come down to how we can get the most money to fund it. And that'll probably be the driving factor on whether it'll be a city or county ballot initiative.
I would encourage you to do both. I mean, at least really research both. We have a new county commissioner that's very pro children. That's Erica Crawley.
Yes.
And then the city of Columbus, they're going through a ballot initiative kind of they're rethinking it and making it a little more difficult right now. So in fact, you all should be going to those meetings and making sure that they're not making it too difficult for us to practice our right for initiative and referendum. So that's going on right now. And we know very well, because I've done 4 ballot initiatives in the city of Columbus. So it's important that we stay on it and we keep that right so that citizens can enact law. But both places should definitely be vetted in complete ways. But it sounds like you've had some good examples ahead of you, which is really, really helpful in these other cities.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry, we got couple more minutes. Can you tell us about this event, this kickoff event, where people can learn more information?
Sure. So we have a Childcare for All Coalition kickoff event taking place on Saturday, May 14th from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. The goal of that event is to introduce our campaign and what our campaign has done more in depth with coalition or potential coalition partners, and to be able to engage with people and build that support and build truly a grassroots effort, because Columbus DSA can't and shouldn't do it alone. And so, you know, we really want that in feedback from people and for people to be an active part in developing this project, because certainly, as you know, as you were alluding to before, adaptability is going to be very important as we navigate trying to bring a successful campaign.
Where is this event going to be?
So it's definitely going to be on Zoom. And then we're also exploring an in-person hybrid option, which is going to be at the Hilltop Library, I believe.
Linden.
The Linden Library.
Library.
It's the Linden Library, pardon me.
Okay, so can you give folks that are listening your website that they can find more information about this event and about your project?
Yes, it should be on the calendar at dsa.org. Our event should be on there, which includes the registration link via Zoom. And I don't know if you do show notes or anything, but if you do, then you can probably share the registration link through that as well, but it should
I
be
can
on our
share
calendar.
it. I can definitely share it in all the promo info. Definitely
Wonderful.
will.
Yeah.
So let's see. Real quick, what's your hope in one sentence with this campaign? Let's start with you, Carissa. Oh, you're out again.
We lost sound. I'll jump in.
Go in, Rita.
My hope with this campaign is that we can really build a lot of power among those who really care about children and those who work in childcare or have children, but just really a grassroots power to make childcare accessible and affordable for everyone.
Are you back, Carissa?
Am I back?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Speak loudly.
All right, I hope to activate people here in Columbus to get engaged in something and get engaged here in this childcare effort, because there are so many fronts in which it can help, and I want people to be able to channel maybe confusion that they might have into something actionable and concrete, and that's what we're hoping to do here in Central Ohio.
And what you're doing can only help the children and help the parents who need it. And we also need a higher minimum wage, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, not just care workers.
No. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much
for having us.
All right. In addition to our Friday 5 p.m. broadcast on WGRN.org, GrassRoot Ohio now airs on Sundays at 2 p.m. at WCRSFM.org in Columbus, and at 4 p.m. on WEJP-LP, Wheeling, Moundsville, West Virginia. You can also find us on SoundCloud, Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks for joining us.